Today we talk about the grid, and I say that as if I kind of know what it is, but I kind of don't. You know, I mean, it's the grid, so it's power. It somehow all works together to give me lights when I flip the switch. But what exactly is the grid? And like, how does it all work? How does it all play together?
Right, the grid is the 20th century engineering marvel. It's the most advanced and complex just-in-time manufacturing process that we have. So you have generators that create electricity. You have a way to distribute that electricity through our transmission and distribution network. And then you have the consumers and end use. And that right there is the entire grid. And from a generation mix, you have generation with nuclear, gas, renewables, and these are the sources that provide, you know, the electricity that run our homes and companies, industries.
So how does Oak Ridge play a role in all of this, as far as the grid's concerned?
Right, so Oak Ridge National Laboratory, many people don't even know where Oak Ridge is, but in East Tennessee, we are one of 13 different laboratories working with the Department of Energy on modernizing our electric grid. And within the Grid Modernization Initiative, there are key elements of where we want to focus our attention in this grid modernization. The first thing is getting better situational awareness, understanding what's going on, because we're like driving a car blind in certain times at the distribution level, so you can't really see what's going on. So getting more sensors, more situational awareness throughout the entire grid, being able to model the grid. We're talking about clean energy. How is that generation mix going to impact the operation? So when you have sensors, when you have models, you have to answer the question, so what? So what do we do with all that? And then there's a controls aspect where you take control and do different things. And that control could be, having distributed energy resources or renewable energy systems that, provide a certain benefit. It's looking at energy storage technologies, being able to look at power electronics and how that plays a role in, controlling power flow. So,
how do you see Oak Ridge playing a role in the future as it develops new technology?
So as we develop these different technologies, since we don't own the infrastructure, partnering with key utilities and industry is critical to our success. So we have a lot of collaboration with utility partners to look at ways of taking ideas and technologies where if we develop a sensor, being able to deploy it within a substation or within their service territory. So we have different tools and technologies where we have deployed sensors throughout the entire country where we can understand the health of the system and we can monitor what's going on across the entire country. So wide area situational awareness.
And Oak Ridge primarily focuses on nuclear energy?
So our roots date back to the Manhattan Project and the race to build the atomic bomb. There were 3 different types of technologies that were being developed, and we had, based upon those 3 different sites, so the graphite reactor was just one of 3 different ways of being able to develop, weapons-grade material. It was plutonium, and then we had 2 other locations that looked at enriching uranium. So we've gone from the history and the roots of the Manhattan Project to where we're looking at energy as a whole and supporting advancements in energy to take ideas from, hey, I have an idea, to do research for the sake of knowledge discovery, all the way to applying the research and working with industry to take those ideas and move them into the grid.
I've heard that our homes today would have more in common with our grandparents' generation than their house with their grandparents' generation. And really, that's all to do with the development of the grid.
The electrification and the rural electrification back in the 30s transformed everything. That was a key part of this revolution that we saw and this industrial revolution that occurred. And it was the ability to get electricity to the farms. And once you had that, you have the infrastructure with transportation, this transportation electricity, and the growth that we've seen from there, and the change of life that we've seen was so much more transformative then to what we've seen over the past 20, 30 years, because, hey, being able to work inside and not have to, be outside cooking or go into the outhouse and things like that, those advancements, have continued, but the transformation that we saw back before electricity was there are just so immense, and where we saw so much change coming in to this country. All I could think about is Walt Disney World and the Carousel of Progress. When you go from one scene, you move to another scene and see the progress that's been made from the 40s all the way to today. And the progress that we've seen from the 50s and to today, for the most part, it's, hey, I want to be able to look at better, easier washing my clothes, easier ways to cook, keep that refrigeration. That quality of life hasn't changed. But people before that, before electricity, they didn't understand. I mean, everything was in real time. We can't store, it was much harder to store food and preserve food. So you had a lot of salt preserves and things like that, versus once electricity came, you had the refrigeration. It completely transformed what we're able to look like within a home, a residential home.
I suppose the one advantage they did have was they were mindful of today, and it is certainly progress in a lot of the way we think about it in regards to convenience and the abundance of things that we have, but how quickly we take that all for granted, right? The ability to just flip on the light or to throw something in the fridge, where they were thinking, what am I going to hunt and kill today? What am I going to pull out of the garden and eat today?
Exactly.
And, spending a significant amount of time, building a root cellar, using salt to preserve their meats or whatever.
Well, right. And it's this idea of complacency. And the complacency is a real concern.
Sure.
And how do you break away from that? And the understanding of, there are many issues that come with complacency.
Sure.
So from a society, I think it's important to understand, don't take for granted that when you flip the switch, the lights are there. Today, where we are fortunate enough. When we go into our home, we flip the switch on, we have no idea what that means and what's going on behind the scenes. And you kind of, you weave your way back to, when I flip that switch, because we don't have ubiquitous storage everywhere, there's some generator that's cranking up. And is that generator coming from natural gas? Is it coming from coal? It could be coming from many different sources. But we've just, come in with the expectation, you flip the switch, power's on, really has no implication. So education is a key part of what we need to do to, educate our kids, educate our adults, our grandparents, because generation to generation, 80%, 90% of people don't really understand the specifics of our energy system and what the implications are. So I think being able to educate and have that understanding is so important. And without that understanding, you won't be able to drive change. It's kind of like our smart grid. If you don't understand the situation, if you don't have situational awareness, how do you change things?
Sure. Do you have any ideas for how to educate those individuals going forward? Are there any interesting programs or
education has to start.
Besides this show, which will educate.
Of course, the show is the best way to do it, and get the show into elementary schools. But you have to start with kids, and you have to find a way to make science and engineering fun and interesting. Being able to start there, I think, is important, and there are many different programs that are trying to do that. Universities and colleges are actually have programs that reach out to the K through 12 communities. We're also working with colleges and junior colleges for bringing more education and workforce development into the mix. But that's not easy. But that's something for the education and understanding of what goes on, because that's really going to be the key to driving change.
So how are Americans getting their energy today, primarily in regards to coal, wind, solar, nuclear?
So over the past decade, we've seen significant generation mix changes. We've traditionally been heavier on the fossil fuels and coal, but today we have about 40% natural gas. We have 20% that's tied to the nuclear side, 20% that's going to be tied to coal, and then 20% that's renewable. So it's kind of a 20, 20, 20, and 40. 40% being the natural gas side. And that's the way, 93 quads of energy in this country, that's how it's kind of, differentiated.
So as far as Americans are concerned, they could be getting their energy from a number of different sources.
It's going to be a very diverse portfolio. Yeah. And you're going to see that portfolio change to more of the cleaner energy, higher renewables, sure, whether it's wind and solar. You'll see less coal, probably more nuclear, and less natural gas over the next 20 years.
As far as energy consumption, how do you see that playing out? Do you see, are we going to use more and more energy? Should we be using as much energy as we are, average Americans? Are we going to develop ways you believe that we'll be able to utilize more energy, but we'll be more efficient and more clean?
Right. Back in the 70s when the energy crisis hit, there was a real change in philosophy of energy. And we started putting more focus on energy efficiency, standards, codes. And since 1980, as an example, the amount of energy our homes consumed has dropped 33% roughly, which is significant. The amount of energy efficiency continues to improve over time. So our consumption, sure, reduces, yet our homes continue to maybe get bigger. So, when you look, right, at energy consumption, we see it, population goes up, energy consumption goes up, but overall our efficiency has reduced. And you take the TVs. When we started getting big screen TVs, sure, the amount of energy that people were using, well, once they started realizing the implications, they said, hey, we need to put some standards here. And within 4 years, there was a 75% drop in consumption of power from TVs. So it's, when you put your mind to it, sure, and realize, hey, we have these nice comforts, yet we need to be doing something different from a consumption side, and being good stewards of the environment.
I think I've seen the biggest change within lighting, whether it be in office buildings or at the home, just it's hard to find a tungsten bulb anymore, everything went to fluorescent, LED.
Yeah, within a home, you look at the home and consumption within homes, and, lighting used to be much higher. It's dropped in half. And then, the space heating, HVAC, that tends to be, your largest energy consumption within a home.
Yeah. So on the grid, it's utilizing energy and power from different resources, right? Might come from a coal plant, from a nuclear plant. How do they all work together? How is it, and do we see energy becoming more decentralized as we go forward, to where, because, now, right, what happens if one power grid, unit shuts down, that could really be detrimental to an entire community and potentially a, large portion of a state,
Right. Going back to the history, centralized generation, you transfer and move the electricity to different homes from a central to the end use. What we're seeing now is more distributed generation, being able to have the generation at the home, at the business. These technologies called microgrids, instead of a vast energy delivery system, it's, hey, let's have a small community being able to provide power and electricity to that neighborhood. We've partnered with Southern Company, and working with 62 homes created a microgrid in Alabama.
Oh, wow.
And during the development of that, there was some accidental cables being cut, the power went out, but we were able to maintain power in that neighborhood, even though the surrounding power got cut. So very interesting, when you start to look at the trends, we see more storms coming through, and the implications and impacts of these storms can be devastating. These polar vortexes, we've seen wildfires. So the idea of resiliency is critical to our future and being able to maintain electricity at the homes. And so this distributed approach versus a centralized approach is something that we're studying and continue to study to be able to improve resiliency within our critical infrastructure.
This video is inspired by our PBS series, Reconnecting Roots.
Connect with me, Gabe McCauley, and Reconnecting Roots by visiting reconnectingroots.com, where you'll discover music, blogs, behind the scenes, our podcast, and more. Join our email list and never miss a beat.